Good morning, you guys. I'm here to discuss with you one of my favorite topics. Guess. Sex. This morning, we're going to talk about what makes sex great, especially for women, but for men too, and the three qualities. And it comes out of this book that I just got fresh off the press. I pre-ordered and it arrived 2 days ago. The Marriage You Want. And these authors also wrote The Good Guy's Guide to Great Sex, which you'll find in the playlist. I've just been making a whole bunch of videos about that over the past few weeks. They're Christian authors, and I'm not Christian, so you can just skip over the Bible parts of it. Or sometimes it's interesting to read the Bible parts and see where people have kind of distorted what it says. So I find that very interesting. I really like this couple. First of all, they talk about what makes sex great isn't just the frills. You have to have a real solid foundation, a foundation where sex is intimate, mutual, and pleasurable. And that's what we're going to be talking about in this video. So it's not just, how often you have it, but having this really good foundation. And also that we don't define sex as intercourse. Intercourse is one way to be sexual. But if we define sex as intercourse, something that easily brings most men to orgasm but not women, then we're also saying that sex is only an act in which certain body parts line up in a way to give a man an orgasm. And you certainly do not need intercourse to have sex at all. It's just one way to have sex. So I think that people should find a word for intercourse. I use the word fucking. People don't like to hear me say that word. Some people say making love, but again, that's not intercourse. That's any way that you can be loving with each other. Find a term for intercourse other than sex, so that you really are using appropriate language and reminding yourself that there are many ways to be sexual. You can say intercourse, nothing wrong with that. You can say fucking. If any of you have any other terms you like to use that are a little bit maybe more PG or easier for shy people to say, please leave it in the comments. We really have to get away from making intercourse synonymous with the word sex. So what is the foundation? Intimate, mutual, and pleasurable. These three things. So we're going to go over these one by one. Now, one thing I've really enjoyed about reading their books is that they did a survey of 30 or 35,000 people and asked them a lot of different questions about relationship satisfaction, how they share team, how they feel about being a member of a team, teamwork in their relationship, whether the woman's opinions matter in the relationship. Because in a lot of Christian couples, they're told, this is where reading the Bible verses are good too, that the man is the leader, but in actual relationships, the woman has equal say. And when she doesn't, there's a lot of unhappiness in the relationship. And one thing that they found in their surveys, they did ask a lot of sexual questions, is that the primary emotion after having sex is feeling used by 16% of women. And they interviewed married people. 60% of married women in their survey report the primary emotion they feel after sex is feeling used. That really breaks my heart. And that's because if sex lacks intimacy, it can be really destructive. It would be better to have no sex at all than to have sex when one person just feels used. Because sex is more than body parts joining. People want to know that you want to be with me. People want to be known and to know another person. It's a knowing, it's a joining. It's not just body parts slamming together. And when you have really great sex, it really can boost your mood. Have you ever really had great sex and then you feel so happy all the next day? You're smiling more, little things don't bother you as much, and you sleep better. But only if you have intimacy in your sex. Because if you don't, you can feel used and you can feel really sad. By the way, the same goes for hookups. That's why I don't do hookups. The next day, I'm not smiling if the guy's blowing me off. So intimacy is really the key. Now, when they scoured peer-reviewed literature to find out what made sex best for women, can you guess what was one of the most consistent predictors of women having an orgasm during sex? Kissing during sex. Not a different toy, not a different position, not about a suitcase full of toys, but kissing. Then they go on to say how porn use wrecks intimacy and how porn use can wreck intimacy. Because some men use porn to soothe their uncomfortable emotions, and so they turn to porn, and then they feel more ashamed, and then they turn to more porn. And also, a lot of guys don't realize that all the free stuff on Pornhub, a lot of it is from coerced, sex-trafficked women. That's why a lot of Pornhub is under a lot of legal scrutiny right now. And if men knew that these women were being trafficked and abused, would they still want to watch it? So they're really against porn. Also, another problem is sometimes when men do quit watching porn, they say, well, I'll quit watching porn if you just give me sex, any kind of sex, whenever I want it. And that's not quitting porn. That's clinging to the same unhealthy view of sex, but directing it to your spouse. That unhealthy view that says, I want to use you. Sex with your spouse is not methadone for your sex addiction to porn. Because having sex with your spouse says, I want to know you, and porn says, I want to use you. And it involves some kind of hiding and inauthenticity because you don't have to show up and relate to another person. There's a pornographic style of relating, which is the opposite of intimacy. We're still talking about intimacy. In intimacy, you're connecting with the other person. You're seeing the other person. You're having affection for that person. You're not just seeing them as an object. Do you know the difference? Okay? I understand the difference. And in porn, if people are watching a lot of porn, they can relate in a pornographic way. But even people who don't watch porn can treat each other as objects, where they say, sex is just physical. Sex is how I get my release. I'm not going to kiss you. I'm not going to look at you. I'm going to keep my eyes closed. I'm not going to care how long I last or how quick I last or how you like it. This is about me getting off. That's the non-intimate way. And I don't know how many couples have sex like that, but I have been on the receiving end in a relationship of sex like that. And it'll make you not want to have sex anymore, frankly. And it can break your heart and leave you in tears, frankly, as well. In the pornographic style of relating, we ruin intimacy because of how we see each other as sexual objects, where we think of like, I need more sex. How do I get more sex? How to have hot sex? It sees sex as an entitlement that is about conquest and taking rather than intimacy, so that intimacy becomes a turn off rather than a turn on. And that's definitely true because I think in healthy individuals, intimacy increases their arousal. But in people that are afraid of intimacy or don't like intimacy, that will turn them off. They can't handle it. It scares them. Another way that people's intimacy can be ruined is through no fault of their own. If they had some kind of negative thing that happened in their childhood or earlier in life, some kind of coercion, which happens to 20% of women and 5% of men. They've been victims of sexual assault. Now, another thing that people sometimes think is in the Bible, it makes it seem like only men should enjoy sex, but they tell us, this is for you Bible people, in the Song of Solomon, that's the book in the Bible dedicated to sex, the woman actually speaks more than the man. And she's enjoying herself immensely. And in order for the woman to enjoy herself immensely, we have to make sure that sex is pleasurable for both. And here they're using the measurement of orgasm, the orgasm gap. In their study of evangelical marriages, let's see, is there an orgasm gap in evangelical marriages? I mean, you would think that these Christian guys are the most devout lovers. But no, 95% of the men say they almost always reach orgasm in their sexual encounter, and it's just half that for the wives, 48%. So this is really not fair to the women. And it explains a lot of the reason that so many women have low sexual desire. When we look at women, and in their study, they looked at women, here's like they have studies all over the book. I'm not going to zoom in on this. You can get the book to read all of it. When they looked at women who have low or very low sexual desire, what did they find? Almost every time, 85% of the time, they found a very understandable and valid reason by asking 3 simple questions. Is she orgasming every time they have sex? In other words, is she having pleasure? Is she feeling intimate with her husband while they have sex? Is she having pain-free sex? Because if there's pain, there's no intimacy, and she's not orgasming every time, she's not going to want to have sex. It's as simple as that. It's just logical. Why would you want to do something that doesn't feel good, that hurts you, where someone's using you as an object, and you're not having any pleasure? And I think that is the core reason, and add to that the 20% of women who were abused as children, sexually abused. That explains, I think, why many women don't want sex. And then they say, what if we add on other libido killers for women, like a spouse's porn use, betrayal trauma, a mental load, exhaustion, or abuse? So, even though we are talking about, it's obvious these women wouldn't want sex, and you can see that too. What are they taught in church? What are they taught in their Christian marriage books, in their relationship books? What are they taught as Christian women? Your man needs sex. It is your duty to give him sex. If you're a loving wife, you will not deprive him. That's what they're taught. It's a very negative message. So instead of telling women what's actually in this for you, they tell women, don't deprive your husbands. Just think about it. How many sermons and books have you heard prioritizing the frequency of sex? And that's all they do. Give it to him whenever he wants, frequent. But how many have you heard telling men to make sure their wives reach orgasm? Crickets. If we stopped seeing sex as one-sided intercourse and started seeing as something that's meant to be pleasurable for both people, then we wouldn't have this orgasm gap. And we would understand why so many Christian women have low libidos and vaginismus. People tend to enjoy things that are enjoyable, but if something is not that enjoyable to begin with, trying to make it better by adding obligation to it is simply absurd. Okay? It's not enjoyable. Now we're telling you that you're obligated to do it. That's crazy. No wonder so many Christian women have vaginismus. Christian women have the same rate of vaginismus as women who have been raped, because the obligation sex message tells them, your pleasure doesn't matter. Your needs don't matter. You don't matter. You're just an object for him to use as an ejaculation device. you might as well get a pussy pocket or one of those dolls. He should get one of those dolls if he is more into objects. And by the way, men who use women as objects, they have something wrong with them in the head. I'm going to tell you, they have some kind of missing parts in their brain, or abuse or entitlement or grandiosity. There's something wrong with them, because why would you touch someone in a way where they don't like it and not even notice? Like, there's something wrong with them. Some emotional IQ missing. I'm going to be honest with you guys. So, more about the intimacy. I think I'm going to make the other 2 parts a separate video. Another important part of intimacy is to recognize that women's sexual arousal response cycle works a little bit differently than a man's, a little bit slower. Men can get hard this quick. For women, our bodies are just designed to take a little bit longer to warm up. And trying to bypass that and force that is really, really harmful and decreases a woman's pleasure and decreases the intimacy, because you're trying to rush someone into being sexually available to you. This is so, so important. I always talk about, a man gets hard very quickly. Like, a dog's always happy to see you. They have a very happy, outgoing disposition. And with a cat, you have to approach them a little bit more slowly. We're not different species, but sexually we're very different. And I often open, like, a woman's body opening is like a flower opening to the sun. You can't force it. It needs warmth and it needs time. And so when they talk about the sexual arousal cycle, from excitement to arousal to plateau, that men pass through these stages fairly automatically. But for women, each stage looks very different. And the stimulation that's needed to get her to the next one differs too. And here's a key point they make that I am so happy they're making, is that sex manuals and magazine articles always talk about the vital importance of clitoral stimulation. And men are very aware now of the clitoris, especially the glands. They're not very aware that the clitoris is 4 inches long and internal. Most men don't even know that. And I think most women don't know that. They think they reduce the clitoris to just the glands, which is just 1% of the surface area and the only visible part. And then men wanting to please their wives dutifully head right to that most sensitive part. But if she's not even excited yet, instead of feeling arousing, it feels invasive. And it's like, whoa. That is the biggest mistake men make, is they go right for the glands of the clitoris, but that's because they want the woman to go right for their penis and grab it. So do the opposite there of what you think. Grab your guy's penis and don't go right for the glands of the clitoris. It feels invasive. It destroys intimacy. It feels like being attacked, frankly. You have to wait for her body to want it. And then if she doesn't like it, this is where women think they don't like sex. He grabs her glands instantly. It feels invasive, like a pap smear. And then she assumes she's broken because her body doesn't want what it's supposed to want, and he's baffled. And they figure she's just not that sexual. This is a huge point. Cannot tell you how many men I've had to teach in my work with men. Slow down. Don't grab the pussy, okay? That's like, no. Men who know what they're doing with the pussy never just grab the pussy, okay? They know. Now, if she takes a while to warm up, that doesn't mean she's deficient or doesn't like sex. Just start with things that get her more excited. And this is part of intimacy. Seeing her as a person, tuning into her response cycle. Give her a massage, kiss her, soft touching in non-sexual areas like the nape of the neck or the inside of the arms. Men like this too. Don't move to genital areas until she's fully aroused. See, you thought I was going to tell you how to have crazy sex in all these positions, but you have to build the foundation. You have to build the intimacy. You can't force and rush someone into just touching them all over. People won't want sex that way. You have to focus on her pleasure and tune into how she's responding. You can't just like treat her as an object and just touch her all over. Tune into her response. That's what intimacy really is. Let her know that there's no expectation that she's got to hurry up and come so he can stick it in or whatever. Have her focus on what her body wants, what her body wants next, and what part wants to be touched, and find ways to communicate that to him. And if she doesn't find sex pleasurable, don't assume her body's deficient. Try to find out how it makes her orgasm and put his orgasm completely aside. If a woman has experienced for years that sex isn't for me, it can take her a whole long time to rewrite that narrative and that script in her head. Unless she had her clitoris removed, she can orgasm. But the narrative of that she can't, or her having tuned out her body, may take a lot of patience to rewrite for her to figure out what she actually likes and how she actually wants to be touched, and not rushing herself along to match the pace of an impatient man. It's the impatient man that's the problem, but the woman doesn't know because she's trying to please him and she's totally tuned out her body. And let your voice speak for your body, you guys. You have to let your words are to speak for your body. Your body has no other way to protect itself. You have to protect your body. You have to protect your pleasure. Do it for your body. Like, be the mama bear for your body, so to speak. At the beginning of marriage, when sex isn't working well, that doesn't necessarily affect her sexual satisfaction that much because she's so in love with him and she's so into him. And I can vouch for that. You can overlook bad treatment, but over time it takes its toll. People can put up with something unfair for a while, but they can't put up with it forever. Focusing only on his pleasure can be a recipe for a sexless marriage. And I can attest to that too. For me, it was the 10-year mark where I was like, okay, you don't care about my pleasure? I'm sleeping with the kids from now on. Sorry to be so honest here. Oh yes, I did speak up. I was always sexually available, but I had the no intimacy type of marriage. No intimacy. No kissing, no intimacy. Okay, it was just, in sex, I was just used more like like maybe they tell these Christian women, you just give it to your husband for him to get off. Many of us were taught that sex is painful for women the first time. That's not necessarily true. And then they talk about how evangelical women suffer from twice the rate of sexual pain disorders like vaginismus than the general population, which is 23% of evangelical women experience vaginismus, with 7% finding penetration impossible. And that's because women are taught that they're obligated to have sex if their husband wants it. And it tells women, you don't matter, he has the right to use you whenever he wants. And if she grew up hearing that she had to cover up so as not to be a stumbling block to boys, she also has a much higher chance of experiencing vaginismus. She's been taught that her body puts her at risk of objectification and assault, and her body can tense up to protect itself, even if consciously a woman doesn't want this to happen. So that's the intimacy part. For the mutual and pleasurable, I'm going to make separate videos. I didn't know this one would go so long. Thanks for watching.